I must say that as problematic as systemic outward-assist is towards black people, it somehow seems to drive them to perform better than other races. Here, let me explain. We've all heard that being black often means that you have to work twice as hard as others. Although life is not easy, this challenge has paradoxically created an advantage for black people in terms of performance. For example, consider affirmative action, which has been controversial. Recently, many Asians argued that affirmative action left them at a disadvantage, claiming it made black people more privileged. They struggled with the idea that perhaps black people were just more overqualified than them, and as a result, affirmative action was struck down. However, even without affirmative action, the Asian community continues to face challenges when it comes to admission in universities. In today's video, we're gonna take a look at that and the current situation on affirmative action.
Hey there, friends, and good morning. This morning, the Supreme Court has struck down affirmative action. What is affirmative action? Affirmative action was a program of positive action undertaken with conviction and effort to overcome the present effects of past practices, policies, or barriers to equal opportunity and to achieve the full and fair participation of women, minorities, and individuals with disabilities found to be underutilized based on availability. So the case that came before the court was Students for Fair Admissions v. Harvard. The lawsuit alleged that the Ivy League University's race-conscious admissions process discriminated against Asian applicants. And the court ruled that Harvard already has very strict standards for admission to their school, and that the use of race in determining admissions to college is outdated and being used negatively to affect others. Now, what is concerning to experts is that Black and Latino admissions to Harvard has dropped, and Native Hawaiian and Native American applicants are also down this year, while Harvard admitted a record number of Asian Americans. That number is up 2.1% from last year, and just about 30% of admitted applicants identify as Asian American. The court noted that they used to affirm the principles of affirmative action, but it's basically gone too far. Quote, the programs lack sufficiently focused and measurable objectives warranting the use of race, unavoidably employ race in a negative manner, involve racial stereotyping, and lack meaningful endpoints. Those admission programs cannot be reconciled with the guarantees of the Equal Protection Clause. I'll have more later today.
So Asians, this is for you. If you're not an Asian person, please keep moving. Please keep scrolling. Okay, I'll wait. All right, I have a question for y'all. How are y'all feeling? Because now that you guys have managed to get affirmative action completely out of school decisions when it comes to picking their candidates, how are y'all doing? I really want to know. See, y'all didn't think this through, did y'all? Y'all blamed us for the reason y'all weren't getting into colleges instead of us just being more qualified than y'all. Y'all didn't really think about that. Like, how dare black people be more qualified than me? So I'm going to go to a white person and I'm going to get them to help me get affirmative action knocked down. And now that there is no affirmative action and y'all still worried about getting into a university, how are y'all doing? Because y'all forgot one main key. They used y'all dumbasses. They sure did. They managed to manipulate y'all into thinking that we were the problem instead of legacies. People that don't even have to have the grades, but just have to have the name to walk right through the door. Y'all thought we were wrong and we were the problem. And y'all just gave them more room to walk their little children right through the doors of Yale, right through the doors of Harvard, right through the doors of Brown, and leave y'all ass out in the cold. So I want to know, how does it feel? So Asians.
This student went viral after suggesting that affirmative action policies ruined his chance of acceptance at top colleges.
Even though he had a near perfect GPA and SAT score, he was rejected by almost every top college that he applied to. And he says this because affirmative action policies prioritize accepting black applicants to the detriment of Asians.
Now, we don't know anything about his essays or his extracurriculars or why he was rejected. Maybe he totally sucks, who knows?
But what we do know is that his claims about affirmative action are currently being reviewed by the Supreme Court.
Both Harvard and the University of North Carolina were sued last year by a nonprofit, alleging that their admissions policies unconstitutionally discriminate based on race. Data uncovered during the lawsuit revealed that black applicants were 12 times more likely to get accepted at Harvard than Asian students with similar test scores and GPA.
Asian applicants' personality scores were also consistently ranked the lowest of all races.
And messages between admissions staff were discovered that placed a controversial emphasis on race.
For decades, the Supreme Court has ruled that affirmative action is legal. It most recently held that race can be considered an admission so long as it's narrowly tailored.
Which basically means that race can be one small part of a larger holistic process.
But opponents of affirmative action say that data uncovered in the lawsuit shows that race was was much more than just a small part, and they want the whole policy ruled illegal for every school.
But supporters of affirmative action say that diversity in schools is hugely important, and that race should be part of a holistic process, especially to equalize any disadvantage faced by people of color.
They also point to things like legacy admissions as a much larger problem.
The court's decision is expected as early as next week, so follow us for a balanced review of that.
The college application process can be so overwhelming and so stressful for all types of students and families. But the LA Times had a recent article that just came out describing how Asian American families and students are really feeling overwhelmed and stressed out, especially since the Supreme Court ruling in June that struck down affirmative action in college application and admissions decisions. But who originally brought that lawsuit to the court in the first place? Let's investigate. In the first college application season since the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action, Asian American families are more stressed out than ever about college admissions. As this commenter here said, I wonder why that is. After the affirmative action ruling, Asian Americans ask, what happens next? And to that I say, welcome. Welcome to the stress that we have all been feeling since forever. Because we tried to warn you. We told you this would happen. When you align yourself with certain people and certain factions, thinking that they'll open their arms to you and they'll want you on their campuses and they'll welcome you with open arms. Look, they played you. They did the old rope-a-dope, the okey-doke on you. And you can thank this man right here, Edward Bloom, who helped that young man bring that court case to the Supreme Court to end affirmative action in college admission processes. Edward Bloom, who's famous for his activism against affirmative action, yeah, that Edward Bloom is the reason why y'all are now feeling stressed out post that decision in June. Because Asian American students felt that they were being discriminated against and that Black American kids were taking all the spots on Ivy League campuses. Legacy admissions were the ones taking your spots, not us. However, did you know that there are tons of scholarships that you can apply to? Oh, wait, those are now under attack also. People are now actively trying to get rid of minority and ethnic and diversity scholarships because they discriminate against other types of people. In college admissions, there are no guarantees. 10 AP classes, a stacked resume, dual enrollment, none of that matters. All the money in the world and private college counselors can't compete with someone who's a legacy from an Ivy League school.
So I was at lunch today, and me and my friend were talking about this article, Post-Affirmative Action, Asian American Families Are More Stressed Than Ever About College Admission. He was super surprised that people in his community, he's part of the Asian community, by the way, but he was super surprised that people are more stressed because affirmative action being repealed was supposed to help them. I had to explain how they'd been duped because banning affirmative action isn't going to help them at all. They were just used again as a tool for white supremacy. They'd been trying to repeal affirmative action for years, but they were using white students as an example. This movement of getting affirmative action repealed didn't start getting momentum until they started using the Asian community. And now that affirmative action is gone, they are going to use this as an opportunity to just pump more legacy students into these institutions. And I had to explain how the modern minority myth is also another aspect of why so many people were duped. I just think we all need to realize the power that we have when we stick together. Black people and PLC across the country. Supremacy culture is going to try to divide us so they can get their agenda pushed no matter what, and we need to realize that.
You ever notice how the same right-wingers who ensured the Supreme Court overturned affirmative action, who ensured that Harvard fired its first black president, who ensured that Duke stopped all full-ride scholarships for black students, who ensured that Columbia is arresting students for combating war crimes against Palestinians, who ensured that a brown Muslim woman who is valedictorian is denied her right to give the commencement speech at USC, who ensured that despite all of that, white legacy admissions remain intact. You ever notice how those folks are the same ones telling us, stop making everything about race?
I just love that for them. I love it for the Asian conservatives and the white men I still see making headlines about not getting into their top schools, that are not getting into the Ivy League. I'm so happy for them. And I never thought I would find peace with them overturning affirmative action, because they can't blame me anymore. They can't blame me anymore. They can't say it's my fault. They can't say it's reverse racism.
So let's talk about this. Asians try to tell other Asians about affirmative action and what it would do to them. Black people try to tell Asians what would happen. Hispanics try to tell Asians what would happen if they went along with this. For Asians that went for this were just pawns for white supremacy. You got into bed with dogs and then you woke up with fleas. You didn't think the Ed Bloom knew that this would not affect black people? HBCU rates have increased. Black people are still going to college because we have our own. Black women are going to college because we have our own. White supremacists will treat Asians like they're white until they're no longer needed, and then they're Asians again. What helps black people in America helps everyone in America. And you guys are now facing the consequences of what happens when you try to hurt black people.
We have been talking about affirmative action and how palm-colored seem to be against it, and we talked about Edward Bloom in one video that we covered, and how he was fighting against affirmative action, and it seems like he succeeded. Yeah, he did, with the help of the Asian community, that is. But what are legacy students? Because it's a term that I heard pervasive in today's discussion. So in case we are not familiar with it, legacy student, or a legacy, somebody who's regarded as having a parent who graduated at that institution or somebody who's close to them. So they may hold significant influence with their ties with this institution because of their parents or a close relative. Because legacy applicants often receive preferential treatment in the admission process. That means they're like special or something, you know? And the practice of legacy admissions dates back to the late 19th century and to the early 20th centuries. So it's got some origins that are pretty much ceremonial to these institutions, and that is the reason why these people hold significant influence. But it's not just the influence in itself, it's also for the money, as we're gonna see later. So legacy admissions can be financially beneficial for universities. Alumni are often generous donors, and admitting their children can help foster a sense of tradition and continued financial support. So these institutions pretty much just do it for the financial support that these parents have, right? The parents of these legacy students have for these institutions, because they are the donors. They are the ones that invest in these institutions. So these guys are favored. These guys are regarded as special. So as much as the Asian minorities think that now that they've done away with affirmative action, they're going to be the special ones, I don't really think so. The special ones are the money, right? Where the money comes from, those are the special kids. Now, legacy admissions are very controversial because they can perpetuate social and economic inequalities. Just pretty much put it as a social hierarchy in this case, right? They can create that social hierarchy. So critics argue that these policies favor students from privileged backgrounds and undermine meritocratic principles of the admissions process. I guess this is what everybody was talking about affirmative action, not knowing that it was these legacy kids that were taking up those spots. So, when did the fight against affirmative action begin? Let me tell you. So affirmative action policies were introduced during the civil rights movement to address racial inequalities, right? However, by the late 1970s, those policies faced significant legal challenges, right? So they were created in the 1960s, and 10 years later, challenges erupted, right? So the landmark case Regents of the University of California was one of the first major challenges, where the Supreme Court ruled against the use of racial quotas, but upheld the consideration of race as one factor in admissions. And in the 1980s to 1990s, the opposition to affirmative action grew, with critics arguing that it constituted reverse discrimination. During this period, several states, including California, with Proposition 209 in 1996, banned affirmative action in public employment and education. Therefore, let's just say that immediately they started affirmative action, that's when the fight began. It was started in 1960. 10 years later, they started fighting against it. They felt that now the palm colors were less privileged than the black. And perhaps I think they saw the future coming, because perhaps they realized that the black folk was going to be educated as much as the palm color folk was going to be. So this fight has to start, so as to widen the gap between the two. Because you got to know that palm color privilege, when it was created, it reinforced the narrative and the notion that the palm color is more important. The palm color should be more educated. The palm color should be more privileged and all that. And in the 2000s to the 2010s, legal battles battles continued, such as the battle in 2003 and in 2013, as well as in 2016, where the Supreme Court upheld the use of race in admissions under certain conditions. And the other one in the 2020s, which was the most recent and significant development, it occurred on June 29, when the Supreme Court ruled that race-based affirmative action in college admissions is unconstitutional. So this decision marked a major shift in the legal landscape and has sparked renewed debates about how to achieve diversity and equity in education. But you gotta know that as much as affirmative action was a thing, it didn't even favor black people as much as Asian minorities thought, right? Because black people still had to work twice as hard compared to other races, like I mentioned in the beginning. Now, these are some of the conversations being had in regard to affirmative action and how it made black people so privileged that we had to take it away. Just joking. You know, that's a stereotype in itself. Now, we have come to the end of our discussion. Please leave your comments in the comment section and tell me what you think about today's video. I will see you in the next video. If you found it interesting, don't forget to like, to share, and to subscribe. That helps us a lot on our channel to provide the information and the content that resonates with you. Signing off for now. Take care.